Hey, hey man, how you doing? It's a pretty groovy pad you got.
Thank you?
I know I'm talking a little 60s, but it's me, cool 90s Dan.
Oh, sure.
I talk 60s because 60s culture is still so prevalent in the 90s because my generation's entire cultural identity is shackled to that of the boomers that control the media I consume. So that's why I'm a little 60s, but it's me, cool 90s Dan. How you doing? Wow. Whoa, what is that?
You have a little Ted Theodore Logan going on.
I'm in love with the 80s as well. What is that?
That's my laptop.
Whoa, is that magic? This is like space age times. This is amazing.
It's only been like 20 years.
I woke up from a coma. Everything's amazing.
I'm sorry, it's like 30 years.
Yeah, don't you hate it when you say 20 years ago and you think you mean the 90s?
Yes, I do. Where is this going?
We can cut to the song now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sadie Hawkins Pod.
Hello. That opening
bit...
I
really expected you to keep the voice going.
90s Dan would still be here.
Your actual voice was so jarring.
You were so comfortable with 90s Dan.
Yeah.
That bit didn't go exactly where I expected it to go, but I was like, I don't want to do it again. It came out. It's its own thing now. We're gonna keep it.
Sure.
So I was thinking like vinyl 90s, like generational divides.
Right.
Because we got to talk a little bit about generational divides today, especially as they apply to technology. Like, no, we're not going to get deep into that side of it, but that is absolutely a theme. That's a theme of this song, flat out. And then the way that we look back at this song is also the inherent theme. You know what I mean? It's
yes,
so funny.
Because we've already moved on past...
We've already moved on past the song.
Blank CDs.
And it's amazing. Yeah, we'll talk about it a little bit more in a bit. But we've been sitting on all these voicemails, so let's try to listen to someone who's been waiting a long time. Okay, here's one from Sean that he left back in March. A month ago. Basically a month ago.
Hey, Dan and Jess, this is Sean from Pennsylvania. Just listened to the Mrs. Hippopotamuses, and I just had to say, this song had a special, thing for me because I actually grew up in Ohio, about 30 minutes away from where Relient K started in Canton and everything, and so I always felt like a little extra kinship with them, being from the same area as them and everything. So this song was like a really cool, nice thing. Whenever I heard it, I'm like, oh, hey, look, a love letter to Ohio. I know it might sound weird to people who aren't from Ohio, but I also have a funny story about the OHIO chant. I don't know if it started with the Ohio State University, but it's kind of associated with them. Like it's a chant at the football games and other sports games and everything with them. But it's associated with the Ohio State University, but it's also just kind of like a general calling card for people from Ohio. And I tried explaining this to my wife once, who was born and raised in Pennsylvania, and she thought it was weird, didn't believe it and everything. So there's one day we were traveling, and we stopped at a rest stop, and there was this bus full of Ohio State athletes. So there's no way that I could have planned this or anything, all right? So we were waiting in line for some food with some of these athletes, and I said, watch this. And I said, OH, and some of the athletes around us went, IO! My wife was just kind of like mind blown. She's like, I've never seen that happen before. I've never seen it in the wild. And it's like, I just proved her that it's legit a thing. It's a thing for Ohio people. And it was just a lot of fun, a little fun memory. So yeah, I love that song. It's great for people who are from Ohio. Once again, keep up the good work. I'm still listening. Bye.
That's so funny. The whole state is in on this little inside joke.
It reminds me of when Pee Wee Herman is like talking to Dottie on the phone. Right. She doesn't believe he's in Texas. And he's like, hold on, the stars at night are big and bright. Oh, Jessica almost dropped her tea.
I was trying to clap, and
the call to clap along to the Stars of Texas was so strong that she was literally just going to let her mug fall from her hands.
We lived in Texas for a hot minute, like a month. So yeah, it was. You couldn't walk down the street though and just go, "The stars at night are big and bright." Nobody stopped and went. Deep in the heart of Texas. It was a bummer, actually.
Yeah.
Kind of like how you can't actually park the car in Harvard Yard.
No, you can't. Jessica was so upset that you can't park the car in Harvard Yard. And I'm like, no, Harvard Yard is like a park where people sit and have lunch and read their books.
It's an actual yard.
I know. And I'm not even entirely sure which one is Harvard Yard. Because if you go to the Harvard area in Cambridge, there's a big park that's sort of like one of the centerpieces of driving through the area, and then there's the actual campus of Harvard that you can walk through. Even if you're just there shopping in the area, you could kind of like cut through the campus to get to different sections of malls and stuff in the area. So I'm never really sure which is the Harvard Yard, or if it even exists. If it's
but
just from the song.
But you pointed it out to me once.
I always assumed it was the main park. But then later on in my life, I was
Danny lied to me.
Well, I didn't. Because as a kid, I'm like, oh, park the car in Harvard Yard. And in my mind, when my parents, as I was a kid, when we drive through the Harvard area, like going to other stuff, I'd be like, oh, that must be Harvard Yard. And then later on in life, I'm like, oh, wait, I'm talking about the park now.
So people might actually be able to park their car there. So I went from thinking that I was living the truth to finding out from you I was living a lie to now finding out
the two places I'm talking about you can't park in.
Okay.
They're parks. One is a college campus, and one is a park. So neither one can you park on. Okay? I don't know what to tell you. I did get to park. There's a church. I don't remember the name of the park that I'm thinking of, but the park right off of Harvard. There's a church there. And one time I went to see Godzilla. Big tie-in with HBO Max right now. I went to see Godzilla Final Wars at the Brattle Theater with a group of friends, including Johnny, who we often talk about, and Dan, who was the lead singer of the local ska band Good for Life. And he knew this guy that worked at the church that was right there, so we got to park basically on the sidewalk of the church. And I was like,
oh, nice.
I feel like we're going to get a ticket, but he said we're good. And it was right along the park that I always thought was Harvard Yard, so it's the closest I ever came to parking on Harvard Yard.
Sorry, I'm really distracted. You have this brand new aggressively white beard hair that's just popped up this morning, I think.
I don't know what to tell you.
It's my fault, I know.
Speaking of stress, just a quick side note. We do have another voicemail to get to in a second, but I announced this on my personal Twitter, but I'm taking a partial social media respite. I'm basically, all that means is I deleted Twitter and Facebook from my phone, and it ties back to this song so well. I said to myself, I gotta make social media like 2002 again. Laptop only. Like the young millennials, or the older millennials, of whom this song that we're talking about this week was directed, when you came to social media and DMing and IMing, you had to set aside time every day to sit at your computer, your desktop, and decide, I'm going to do instant messaging right now. I'm going to do MySpace and early Facebook right now. And then you'd go off with your life, and it wouldn't follow you everywhere. And I'm realizing I'm having trouble with social media in the post-COVID world.
So 2002 social media. So you mean like LiveJournal before you went off to play The Sims and pod racing?
Exactly. Now, you could debate if, for our generation, it was healthy to just be sitting at a computer desk for like 6 hours. But the thing is...
It gets you ready for the workforce.
It gets you ready for the workforce. And we didn't have the kind of stresses that come with social media now because, like, I don't know, like, to me, and I know there's, like, that Netflix documentary about the real problems with social media and, like, the real intricate science of how it's changing our brains and stuff. But when it simply comes to, like, the fact that it's here, I'm holding up my phone, in my pocket all day long, following me into my regular life, I was like, I'm calling it office hours. I'm doing social media office hours. If I want to do Twitter and Facebook, I got to do it on the computer like it's 2002. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But Instagram really gets you because they're an app. They're basically app only. Like, you can do some stuff on the website, but you can't really post easily. You can post if you spoof your browser into saying that it's an iPhone. Like, that's possible, but it doesn't really work half the time. Like, movies, you can't really upload video. So
yeah, it's just, social media is so stressful. I got rid of Facebook over a year ago now, and I'm happy. I don't like I just deactivated, but I'm like, I could delete it. I don't have any intention of going back. And I took Twitter off my phone, which I do every now and then anyway. So I just got rid of it off my phone, and so now every now and then I'll just like log in on a laptop like you, just to see if anything's happening that I need to know about.
At this moment that we're talking, speaking of social media, Brady is off harassing Reliable Josh. Because Josh sent me a DM of a DM he got from Brady, but he doesn't know who Brady is. Because Josh made a joke about the birds and the B-sides. Uh-huh. And then a couple of our specific listeners who have already heard the episode where we're like, it's bird and B-sides, because that was a revelation to us.
Right.
And how it is posted wrong on Apple Music and other forms, like people who type it in just thought it's birds and the B-side. But Brady, I guess, like, sent him like a middle finger emoji and stuff, but he was joking. But Josh didn't know who's this guy harassing me. And I had to explain, that's one of our biggest listeners. He was our first patron.
Overload.
That's our corporate
right. Overlord. Jeez.
Brady is a bit of an overload sometimes.
This is what we get for recording the podcast first thing in the morning.
He's coming at us now.
Uh-oh.
So, one more voicemail. This is from Joel, who I forget is in Australia, so he can't actually call our voicemail line. So he left a voice memo to our email, and it got all chopped up. But he's got a really good point that I do want to play. So I'll play some of this, and if I have to sum up what he's saying, I'll do that.
Hi, Jenny, Jess. This is Joel, or Joel Polk. I just wanted to respond to your most recent episode on Be My Escape, part 2. So at first I was kind of on the page that it's a song about God, but there are a couple of lines that really speak that in my head.
Yeah, it's hard to get exactly what he's saying.
This is kind of amazing, though. I like it.
But there is a point I think that's really good here that does come through clearly in a second.
But I came to a realization just while listening to your episode recently, and so I thought I'd chat. So you is referring to God is trying to save my skin.
I love this. This is so Lynchian.
It is. It's like we're in the red room, the black room, the white room. What are they? Basically, Joel's point right here is that he's saying this is a lyric that was one of the main things last week, the last 2 weeks, but last week especially, when I was really like having a hard time where anyone would say this song is only about God or whatever, and I would get like kind of defensive. Right. No one gave me any crap for it last week, but whatever. I still see it as relationships with people, but through the lens of your relationship with Christ. Whatever. The big lyric I got stuck up on trying to make that about your relationship with God, and I couldn't, was I was trying to save my own skin, but so were you. Mm-hmm. Joel, here in this voicemail that got all chopped up, he basically fixed that for me. He said that you were trying to save my skin is basically a confusing pronoun game.
Right.
I was trying to save my own skin, but so were you, parentheses, yes, trying to save my skin. I just couldn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That totally fixed it for me. I'm like, okay, that line is.
And I could not put it into proper words right, for you to get into your brain.
Right. So I was like, okay, that makes way more sense now.
So thank you for putting it into Danny terms.
Yeah. Let me see how much else I can figure out what he's saying here.
Not even Danny terms, just generally better terms.
Yeah. I'm trying to see. Oh, well, I mean, Joel is the genius here, because the genius annotation didn't do a good job at explaining that at all. It just shows a picture of Jesus, and it's like, and he did save skin. It didn't explain he is saving.
It was just a picture of the crucifixion.
They didn't explain how the pronouns. Sorry, that's letting me know the laundry's ready. It didn't explain how the pronouns worked in that sentence, but it makes way more sense now. So let's see if we can hear more from this voicemail.
But really, I'm trying to save my skin. God is also trying to save my skin. There's the line you keep bringing up about I ask you to give what you already gave. But I think that line is referring to the previous line, where God's already given up his life, and he's already done what he for you. You just need to accept that and work with that. He's already done it. You can't ask him to do it again. You can't ask him to die on the cross again. You should be asking, I guess, accept that he died on the cross. So yeah, yeah. How do you get that?
It's so good.
It's like the stems of a disco track or something.
Some Max Headroom going on in there.
Yeah. So the thing he said second here wasn't as revelatory as the first one, but I get what he's saying. The I can't ask you to give what you already gave. I also got hung up on that. I did see how that would be a conversation to God, but I got a little hung up on the idea of like, why would you ask God for forgiveness again when you already know he's given it to you? And Joel points out here very aptly that that's the idea is, you know, you're going to God again. And now I'm extrapolating a little on what I kind of heard Joel say in this voicemail. But God has already given you forgiveness, so you can't ask again because he's already given you forgiveness, and you need to understand that and come to terms with it. That makes sense. Yeah, but I see what Joel's saying. It's like you need to understand. You can't. He's saying I can't ask him to give forgiveness because he already gave it. Yes, I guess that makes sense too. I'm still a little iffy on that, but I completely understand how that's more of a spiritual line than I had trouble with the other line. Whatever. Moving on. And last top of the show business is something we have to talk about. Also goes back to last week, Be My Escape. So suddenly, like a thief in the night, no man knows the day or time, most of Relient K's music has been removed from TikTok.
Oh, yeah. I was not sure where you were going with that. That's right.
Yeah. It was really, really weird, the timing. So for those maybe who didn't hear last week, you know, we hit on TikTok once in a while. I have TikTok on my phone, but I never really use it. Jessica does not have TikTok on her phone, and TikTok has web backups. You can access most of the TikTok archives through your browser. So when you Google a Relient K song, you'll probably get the TikTok web page for all of the posts to that song, and you can watch them without a TikTok account. Be My Escape had more TikToks than there were song meaning posts, which is significant because Song Meanings was a huge forum back in the days of Vinyl Countdown, back in the days of burning your CDs. And the thing was, all of the Be My Escape, many of the Be My Escape TikToks we found, some of them were suggestive, not like actually suggestive, not by a reasonable person's metric. Like some of them were just like some pole dancing, showing a little skin in a cosplay, not really that bad. But there was one that you wouldn't ever assume you'd see when looking at Relient K stuff. It was a pet snake crawling on an actual like dildo. Right?
Yep.
Really weird to see, but funny. We laughed. Oh, and the infamous cosplayer girl who said and like denied all accusations to the otherwise, who said that Relient K is Mormon.
Right.
She's like, I heard Relient K is Mormon, they're Mormon, and she defended her position on every reply and eventually turned off comments, and she was wrong. They are not Mormon.
No.
She's just completely wrong. That was also
tagged
with Be My Escape.
On that same topic, I forgot to mention that in my Who I Am Hates Who I've Been deep dive, like at the very bottom of like my last page of Google search results, it was like Relient K is Mormon. Like it was like I got like that an article came up and I was like, wait, what?
And the Relient K is Mormon like false rumor seems to mostly just originate from this one TikTok.
Right.
So the timing was just astronomical because who knows why Relient K's music was mostly taken down from TikTok. All that remains as of a day before we recorded was the live album Bird and the B-Sides, so we can check if there are any Vinyl Countdown TikToks, and Forget and Not Slow Down. And we know Forget and Not Slow Down has like different copyright holders than all the rest of their discography, because so often Forget and Not Slow Down isn't found in certain countries.
Right, and it's not on Apple
streaming
Music,
services.
yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, whoever owns like the majority of Relient K music publishing, which is not necessarily Relient K, it's not Relient K, just took it all down. But why? How did this happen? And the part that made it like just so unbelievable was the fact that we had just talked about all the Be My Escape TikToks that we bothered to find, and I was going back into that TikTok page to like use a TikTok downloader, like not something that TikTok would want you to use, but use a TikTok downloader to download a bunch of the videos and repost them with credit on our social media, and say I wasn't going to post the snake one. Right. I was maybe going to make a joke about go look for the snake one yourself. But I was really looking forward to posting the one about the guy at Target who's upset that like sports cards and Pokemon cards had a 2 purchase limit.
Right, that's so funny.
But they're all gone. It was crazy, and it took me a minute to even believe it, because on TikTok they're called sounds. So when you go into, if you still have the link, which we had in our notes, you click the link for the Be My Escape thing, and it's like, this sound is not available in your region or country or whatever.
Now, are those TikToks still there just without the music, so we can't find it, or they delete the TikToks themselves?
TikToks are just blocked or whatever. I assume they must still have, they're probably...
Like a copyright strike thing.
Yeah, but it just says this sound is not available on TikTok. So I assume that they're probably still on everyone's existing accounts. And when I posted this, one person said, and I didn't go and double check, but one person was like, you don't think it was to get rid of the Semler videos, do you, Relient K? And like, because I'm sure some people don't like that, but I'm like, I don't think so, because that's all her own
doubt that,
music.
Yeah.
So, but part of me was thinking, like, did someone... Okay, I don't actually think it was because of our podcast. The timing is just so insane. And there was a thing on Blink-155 once where they went to Mark Hoppus's Animal Crossing Island when you could start visiting strangers' islands with a code. And then the next day after they posted that podcast, Mark Hoppus nuked his island. And like the timing there is just too... And that's such a specific thing. It's really just his personal thing. Someone probably sent him a message or whatever. But mostly I'm thinking, my theory is like, maybe someone, either Relient K or someone who works with Relient K or something, was like, we don't like some of these TikToks, maybe especially the one with the snake, maybe especially the one that's just wholesale making up lies about us that's actually spreading out.
Yeah.
And people are saying it like it's true and it has no basis in reality. So just crazy. Or maybe it just has nothing to do with it. Maybe just like the copyright, like things that get taken down off Netflix and then reappear a week later, it's because there was like a contract middle ground for that week. That happens on Amazon a lot. Like, I'll have a thing in my Amazon, and then it disappears from Prime for a week, and then it's back.
Yeah.
So, yeah, weird. Just weird, funny, awkward timing that happened when it happened. But why are we talking about TikTok? That's such a nowadays kind of thing. Let's talk about something that all the kids don't even know about. It's called vinyl. What is this? Is this a Frisbee?
Except vinyl's having a resurrection now.
Right. Yeah, for the last, 10 years, it's been increasing. It's probably one of the things I've seen lots of people say this. I don't know the record industry or the retail side of the record industry, but I always hear how vinyl is kind of like saving record stores in their current incarnation.
Right. Every time I think Vinyl Countdown, all I can think about is Arrested Development.
Because they use the Final Countdown.
Yeah.
For I don't remember all the characters' names anymore.
Job.
For Job's music, his magic show always uses that famous.
Do-do-do-do.
Yeah, hold on, I'll play it because we're gonna talk a little bit about Europe. So this song is called Vinyl Countdown. It's a song about vinyl, written from the point of view of 2003. This song was written in 2003, released on a 7-inch originally, a limited edition mono versus stereo released 7-inch. It had...
And now it goes for like hundreds of dollars on eBay.
So in some previous episode, I think it might have been our 5 Iron Frenzy's Either Dead or Dying episode, or it could have been some other completely random episode, I got really confused about the release history of the Vinyl Countdown 7-inch. But we figured it out, and I'm just going to summarize it here now. So the Vinyl Countdown 7-inch originally came out in 2003. It was really limited in pressing. It was sold basically just at shows and online. And it had the song Vinyl Countdown, the 2 5 Iron Frenzy's Either Dead or Dying versions, and We're Nothing Without You. And I had been confused for a while because since Relient K has that other 7-inch series with the plain cardboard sleeves that just have the sticker on the top and they're numbered, and most of those 7 inches are just special little packages of re-releases of existing songs, or in the case of like the holiday EPs, it's the vinyl version of those holiday EPs with a different name. So like Truly Madly Deeply is called, I can't remember what it's called. It's called like...
there was Friday the 13th or something like that. February 13th. I don't...
Yeah.
I only have a Relient K podcast. I should know these things off the top of my head.
I remembered that the creepier EP on vinyl is called... you just knocked it out of my head. I had it once.
Sorry.
Friday the 13th. It's called Friday the 13th because it's the 13th release in that series. And then the Valentine's EP, Truly Madly Deeply, was released as part of that special 7-inch series, and it's number 14 in the series, and it's got a different title. We're not talking about that right now. I don't need to look it up. That 7-inch series confused me because I thought that the Vinyl Countdown was like a complete re-release of the 7-inch, but it's not. The Vinyl Countdown is like, it's a repackaged, complete, essentially different version of the original Vinyl Countdown 7-inch. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what used to confuse me. If you go get yourself one of the 7-inch series Relient K, with the cardboard sleeves, copies of Vinyl Countdown, you're not getting an original copy of the Vinyl Countdown that was released in 2003, especially because the mix is completely different. Like all Bird and the B-side songs that were previously released, they are all remastered for the Bird and the B-side CD, and the repressed 7-inch with the cardboard sleeve has something more like the CD mix on it. Anyway, that always used to throw me off, was the release history of this song. So we have a guest this week, and it's Brad Moist of Gotee Records, and he was actually the person who founded Mono versus Stereo. I'll let him talk about it more when we get to the guest segment, but basically Mono versus Stereo was started because Relient K was pretty much just the only rock band on Gotee Records, and Toby Mac really didn't want to sign more rock bands because, you know, Toby Mac's from DC Talk. They were more about hip-hop and pop and gospel. So then Brad Moist is like, where they're missing out on these chances to sign all these great rock bands. So he goes and he says, I want to start a sub-label, a subsidiary of Gotee that is specifically going to be our rock branch. We'll have a smaller budget, and it's going to be called Mono vs. Stereo. And they agreed, and he started Mono vs. Stereo, and this 7-inch EP was the second release under Mono vs. Stereo, which is another thing I wasn't really sure of. I don't want to take all of the thunder away from the interview, but this is just the one that I definitely want to mention because it was a confusing thing for me for the longest time. Like, how does Mono vs. Stereo exist and their relationship with Relient K? And basically, like, it was the rock label of Mono vs. Stereo, and and this was their second release.
Gotee.
Yeah, Mono vs. Stereo was the rock version of Gotee Records. So this song originally existed in 2003 on that 7-inch. I have always regretted that I saw the 7-inch happening. I was probably like on a mailing list, or I was like, checking in with Relient K's website. This is, before social media, so it's not like I had a wall or a feed to show me things were coming up. But I definitely believe I had a chance to get the original 7-inch, and I didn't. And I've always regretted it. The mix is different also. And luckily someone put the 2003 mix of Vinyl Countdown on YouTube, so we'll check that out in a minute. But what do you have about the EP and the song?
So I was going to pull up the Wikipedia for this. It has its own Wikipedia. The Vinyl Countdown is the fourth EP by Christian rock band Relient K, released exclusively on a clear red 7-inch vinyl record on mono versus stereo. It was released in 2003, a few months after the band's third full-length album, Two Lefts Don't Make a Right, but Three Do, was released. The Vinyl Countdown was followed a few months later by the band's Christmas CD, Deck the Halls, Bruise Your Hand, giving the band 3 releases in 1 year, and also the second recording on MVS. The 7-inch was dedicated to superfan Jesse Alkery, with a note in the bottom corner of the vinyl sleeve reading, "Here's to Jesse Alkery." Jesse is a good friend of lead singer Matthew Thiessen and the rest of the band, and received the dedication because he helped write the title track off the release, The Vinyl Countdown. Now, I also found elsewhere that this was part of a contest. Something about Jesse Alkery, like, winning a contest or something. And I could not find anything about that in my deep dive, but it's listed on, because they're also, there's a Relient K section on the Less Than Jake wiki,
right?
Which notes this, and it says citation needed. On the regular Wikipedia for the song, it says citation needed. So I cannot find anything about this alleged contest. The only contest I found when I searched for Relient K contests were Relient K and McDonald's contest / promotion. Relient K is in the running for McDonald's current contest promotion, where the winning act will have their music featured in the fast food chain's TV commercial, as well as the winner's image plastered on over 300 million French fry containers worldwide.
I feel like they didn't get that, or we would see pictures of that to today.
With voting already underway at mcdlive.com. The polls close on October 31st. The band that brought you 57 years ago, Two Lefts Don't Make a Right, but Three Do, and The Anatomy of Tongue-in-Cheek, also recently kicked off a 30-city co-headlining tour with Switchfoot and are anticipating the release of their first ever full-length Christmas album, Let It Snow Baby, Let It Reindeer. The album, scheduled for release by Capitol Music Group / Gotee on October 23rd, features Relient K's take on 10 holiday classics and 6 original songs. And this was posted September 18th, 2011.
And Relient K did do a McDonald's sponsored tour. We've seen that footage of them playing In Love with the 80s and Faking My Own Suicide with a big McDonald's banner behind them.
Well, because McDonald's has, like, they have Christian, like, tours that they sponsor.
That's right.
Because
they have a specific Christian
bought
tour.
a VHS tape because we thought it was hilarious of the McDonald's gospel tour.
Right.
And we haven't actually watched it, but we just thought it was funny. And then the other thing I found was a blog on bzpower.com from January 11th, 2011, Relient K Christmas Ornament Contest, post by JordBoy1. I received a poster in the mail today and didn't know why, so I went online to Relient K's fan club website and remembered that I had entered their Christmas contest. Well, it turns out I won. The first contest I've ever won. And even though the winner of the contest was just posted today, and it says I won't receive my poster for 1 to 2 weeks, I got it today, LOL. So yeah, anyway, woohoo, my first time winning a contest. Until next time, remember, disco is in this year. JordBoy1. Nice.
Is this your whole deep dive? Are we basically doing your deep dive first?
No, I have more.
Oh, okay, good. Oh, that's right. You told me some of your deep dive stuff. So also on the Wikipedia, I just went down to personnel, and it says additional production, Brett Schoenman of Fillmore, and it said he did drums on everything except on the EP. He did drums on the song Vinyl Countdown and both Five Iron Frenzy is Dead or Dying songs. But then underneath it says the credits in the booklet of The Bird and the B-Sides showed that Fillmore drummer and former Relient K fill-in drummer Brett Schoenman played drums on every song of this EP except We're Nothing Without You. So my only question, and I believe that, my question is those credits apparently, because we don't have an original copy of the 7-inch from 2003 in our hands. Was Brett the drummer of the actual EP other than We're Nothing Without You, or did he do any like redubbing of drums on the Bird and the B-sides, because those songs were redone. I actually, not redone, well, the thing is they're remixed for sure, but sometimes you can redub in instruments if you feel like they're not good enough when you go back and do stuff. I think they probably did stuff like that for the gold versions of the second and third album. It's very, very possible, but they're not going to give us specific credits to explain where or when they did or didn't do that. So I'm just curious. I just want to know, why were the credits on Bird and the B-sides, but they weren't on... Apparently they weren't on the EP.
Right, maybe because, I saw that too, yeah.
Maybe because the EP, like, you sometimes don't put full credits on a vinyl, on a 7-inch, whatever, I'm not sure. I did DM Schneck, and I asked, because we asked him when he was on the show, did you have anything to do with redubbing any parts on the gold mixes of the the second and third album? And he said no. He said at the time we talked to him about that, he said no. I was wondering if, because it's a couple years later and he was more thoroughly in the band, I said, did you remember re-recording any parts or dubbing over any parts of songs on the second half of Bird and the B-sides that were remixed from their original sources? And in this case, he said, I can't recall doing anything like that.
Okay.
He wasn't as like firmly no as he was about the gold stuff, but I do remember I'm pretty sure when we talked to him and we asked him about the 2 gold records, he'd only been in the band for like a year or 2, so he was like he told us like he had nothing to do with that. Like that was done over there with Mark and the Mats.
Right.
And he wasn't even like around for that. But I'm like, he was on half of Bird and the B-sides. Did he do any little parts to fill in stuff that they were remastering for these B-side tracks? And he said he couldn't remember. So we haven't talked about the song that much yet, but despite the fact that I missed out on owning a copy of the 7-inch at the time, which I could have done because I did have record players from early on, but I wasn't like a huge vinyl collector from the mid 90s to the early 2000s up through like 2006. I would have a record player, or I'd have my grandma's record player, and if I was at a record store and I saw like a cool record from a band I liked, like a Green Day or something, or They Might Be Giants or Weezer, and it was kind of cheap, I would grab it because it looked cool. Like I actually have this very rare 7-inch, I think it's a 7-inch, I haven't looked at it in a long time, I believe it's a 7-inch, of Green Day live at Gilman Street, and it's one of the first records that I bought. And I used to listen to it on my mama. I used to listen to it on Mama's record player because it had rare performances that weren't available on any other CD. And When I Come Around, it's one of the first recordings of When I Come Around, and it's called like, it's got a slightly different title. It's like Here I Come Around or something like that. And I remember the day I bought it in probably like 1996 or something at a Newberry Comics. When I brought it up to the counter, the clerk went, "Whoa." We have had this in the store for a long time. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, look at that catalog sticker. Because Newberry Comics in the Boston area, when they were more of a record store, they've actually had to revert to being more of a comic book store in more recent days because the music industry has changed with physical media. Back when they really were a record store, despite their name, they had a very specific catalog sticker that was on every CD. And when he looked at the cataloging sticker for the store, he's like, I haven't seen that sticker in years. And I was like, awesome. So that was like my first experience with buying vinyl. So going forward from like 1996 to 2003, I should have gone and bought a copy of the Relient K 7-inch, but I didn't. But then luckily at the time, in 2003, fans like immediately made digital copies and shared them on Kazaa and, not Spotify, they shared them where you could get MP3s. Right. There were rare MP3s you could find of the mix long before Bird and the B-sides came out.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember like listening to this song and feeling like a disconnect from it because I was just super into like everything retro when I was in like high school and stuff. So I remember being like 15, I think maybe. And while I was like burning my Apple, music onto my blank CDs, I was also listening to my parents' record collection. Like I came across their record collection in the basement or something, and I was like, "This is awesome! I want to listen to all this." And so they went out to Restoration Hardware and bought me a new record player that was like, it looks like it's in the little suitcase. Like it's, it's cute. It doesn't sound amazing, but
right.
It's the built all in one kind of thing where the speakers are in it. And I remember sitting and just like listening to my mom's Herman's records for hours.
That's funny. So by like 2001 or 2002, I asked for a proper like hi-fi record player for myself, so I could listen to the small collection of records that I did have, and so I could also go out and start getting a few more records that I wanted. And at the time, before the big record boom of the mid to late 2000s, I was able to get like copies of Fishbone's Reality of My Surroundings, like an original pressing of that when nobody wanted it. And now that goes for really expensive. That goes for like $100, like an original pressing. It was recently repressed finally a couple of years ago, which maybe brought the price down, but it was expensive. We went to Toxic Toast Records in Orange County once, and I was talking about, and that's like the biggest ska, specifically biggest ska vinyl store you can go to. It's called Toxic Toast. It's named after a Boss Tones song. And we were talking to the clerk. You were there with me, and I mentioned that I had a copy of Reality of My Surroundings, and he was like, "Oh man, how did you get that? How much did you pay?" And I'm like, "I got it in like 2002 or something." I probably paid like $20. And he's like, "Oh."
Yeah, I wasn't buying in high school. I wasn't buying a lot of like records. I wasn't going into a lot of like music specific stores except like the Virgin Megastore downtown Disney, and they did not really have a vinyl section there. So when I did, I would go, like my parents were really into antiquing, so we'd go in antique stores and I'd look for records there. And what I started collecting Disneyland records. So we have a massive collection of 7 inches of the storybook with the storybooks, the records with the storybooks, where like on side A it's the story and then side B is the music that they play like underneath the story. And I've got like I think I have all of the Star Wars ones that were originally released, and I've got like there was one done for the Haunted Mansion as like a tie-in with the ride, and cool. there's some really cool stuff there, but that was like what I was really into. And then I started really just like that's what I focused on collecting vinyl wise when I was younger.
That's cool. You're so cool. Jessica went to take a sip of water. But I said, even though your records are like Disney records, I'm like, still, you were into it early on. That's cool. The irony of this song at the time in 2003 when it was first released is that it's on a limited 7-inch that's like specifically only through avenues that fans can get it. I don't go and get one, and it ends up being ripped to the internet in MP3s that you can find on trading sites, and that's how I got to hear the song until it finally showed up on Bird and the B-Sides. Because,
so funny.
Yeah, because there's so much to talk about with the lyrics of the song. So first of all, I guess we should talk about the music. It's just a cool, classic Relient K, sort of pop punk, adjacent pop rock sort of cool part. A cool song. I'm thinking all the different parts. I'm thinking about how it's got like, it's like a pop punk sort of song, and how it's got that like slowed down, that lower tempo part towards the end, like the slow pretty part, basically, as I would call it, which is what like Mark Hoppus will say in live recordings for What's My Age Again, where he's like, it's the slow pretty part. Like that's what I think of when like a pop punk song kind of like slows down and just gets kind of like arpeggios. There's a lot of arpeggios in that middle part. I only know that because Daniel talked about it on something else. We were talking about hardcore.
Speaking
and stuff.
Of Daniel,
what about him?
Didn't he hit us up on you were telling me about this on Twitter to say something about listening to music based on age? Oh, it was about the Stephanie Meyer
right.
playlist.
When I posted on our social media about Stephanie Meyer's playlist that you're supposed to listen to when you read New Moon, he said something to the extent of like, she was 40 when this music came out, and that's like, she was way too old to be listening to this music at the time.
And I was like, Yeah, but she also inspired E.L. James to write fan fiction in her 50s that turned into 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah, that's a little worse. Like, if you're in your 40s listening to music that's meant for kids 30 or, 20 to 30 years younger than you, whatever, I don't see how that's necessarily weird. But yeah, the E.L. James thing, that's really weird, because she's like, I'm going to take these high school characters and write them as creepy executives and stuff with BDSM.
Young executives.
BDSM.
But yeah, I don't know. I think that if you're into popular music, you can stay into popular music regardless of what age you are. It's just what you're into. It's art,
That's so lame. I'm just kidding. So this is like a cool. So there's, I don't know. There's not much to say about the music. It's just like a cool Relient K song. It really does sound like more of the first 3 albums than which is Yuppers, which is, this is like a nice little like last vestige of that Anatomy and Two Lefts sound, right? And then we get right into after that. I remember hearing an interview with Mike Dirnt of Green Day, when I think of vinyl as well, in like the late 90s. And this was actually like podcasts before podcasts. Like, it was a Real Player audio interview with Mike Dirnt.
Wow. A Real Player interview.
This is the thing, is like podcasts became known as podcast. Sidebar. Podcasts became known as podcasts once iPods came around. But I found audio interviews and audio like radio shows downloadable on the internet, in the early 2000s, maybe even in like 99. So the idea of podcasts has obviously been around for a long time. But this one thing with Mike Dirnt was like, and this is in that era of Green Day where they're between the success and the come down of Dookie and before American Idiot, like 4 years before American Idiot. So this is actually their biggest lull as a band in their more famous time. And they're like, yeah, and so you probably could get to Green Day easier. They were playing smaller venues for this middle time of like Nimrod and stuff. And he was like, everyone brings me their tapes, and now people are starting to bring me their CDRs. But like, why don't any of these little kid bands or high school bands?
Right.
Is like, if one of these bands brought me a 7-inch, then I would really give them like serious cred and really check them out. Because 7 inches were a major part of the punk scene, and I don't know exactly in the history of recorded media. I guess that goes back to like maybe 7 inches were cheaper back then. I'm talking about like back in the 70s and 80s, and like maybe it was easier to go get a 7-inch pressed and cheaper when you're doing everything DIY, which is the opposite now. 7 inches are so expensive to print now, it's almost not worth it to bands. Like, when you print a 7-inch in 2021, it's like you're doing it for the love of getting this thing out to your fans, because you can't make a profit. You literally can't make a profit for the cost to what you'd have to charge, like $30 for a 7-inch to even start to break even. This is what I hear on things like the Punk News podcast, where they know more about this stuff. So that's why there aren't a lot of like bands specifically releasing 7 inches, unless they're bigger bands or they just want to put out something really cool for fans.
Yeah, I think it was way cheaper because, and I don't actually know if this is super real or not, but I would assume it is because of the neo-realistic nature of the artist, but they're in a Godard movie, and I think it's masculine, feminine. It might not be that. They're in Paris, and they go to like a booth where you record a 7-inch.
Right.
So yeah, it would be feasible to just, produce a 7-inch, I guess, back then, and maybe easier than, getting all of your big, recording equipment and paying for huge studio time to do like a tape or a CD.
Right. The thing I hear now is like a lot of punk bands nowadays, if you want that cred, but also something cheap in physical media, that's why everyone's going towards cassettes. Because now cassettes have that like old school credibility that vinyl had, but cassettes are cheap to produce still. Like, they're not hard to, they're still manufactured enough that they're not, the cost isn't prohibitive like making a 7-inch, where you can only go to a factory. And all these factories nowadays, the few factories that are left in the world that produce vinyl, they're all so backed up That's what, and people want vinyl so much. That's why new vinyl becomes so expensive nowadays, is because there is a big demand. The demand for it doesn't meet the ability to supply, basically. Like, if there were more vinyl factories, there was a very famous vinyl factory right here in the Valley that just had to close, and it probably just shrunk the market even more. You know what I mean? So that's why a new copy of like a Fleetwood Mac album costs like $45 or 50 or 60 bucks. Or like even a new Ramones record costs like $40.
But new cassettes, you can go out and get like a new cassette for $5-10 still,
right.
Like brand new.
Yeah. So it's funny. So there's two nostalgic tears you can go off from this song, because I think this song was so cool at the time in 2003, where I had some visibility to vinyl, but then Relient K is writing a song in 2003 to their listeners saying like, hey, why doesn't everyone still like vinyl? What's the deal? And, Relient K is a little older than me, but so they probably actually specifically remember having records in their house. Like, my parents didn't really like music that much. We didn't have records sitting around. We didn't have, my mom didn't really have a collection of records from her childhood. Like, she had a few, but nothing. And they were in like storage by the time I was a kid.
Like ours were in the basement. And when we got married and we merged our vinyl collections, our moms listened to the exact same kind of music in college. And so It's like we have like 2 copies of Cat Stevens, 2 copies of Billy Joel, 2 copies of like every Moody Blues album.
Yeah. So I loved the fact that they were like specifically, and I kind of forget at the time in 2003 that I was this isn't really against Daniel's point of Stephanie Meyer, but I was like 2 or 3 years older than probably the median Relient K fan age. But it was such a statement in 2003 when MP3s and Napster and Kazaa and all that stuff's really taking off. eMusic.com and iTunes is starting to come out with those have the sort of legal MP3s, and even a thing like mp3.com, which was kind of like the original version of SoundCloud, where you could like host your MP3s for free and have they were legal MP3s for people to check out, independent artists and stuff. That's the heyday, and that's how kids started experiencing their music then. And I was certainly experiencing my music that way as well. And you're burning it onto CDRs, and that's how you experience your music. But I was already, since I was born in 82, and I'd come up with CDs, and I'd had a little exposure to vinyl, I immediately understood that MP3s sounded worse than physical media. They sounded way worse, especially back then. Like nowadays, the gap is closing with streaming sounding, you lose some sonics or whatever with streaming if you don't have your settings right, but for the most part, streaming and YouTube videos still sound as good as CDs. You're just losing a tiny bit of fidelity that most people don't care about. But MP3s back then with that like digital warble, it sounded like someone was drowning inside a radio station.
You clearly never had any hit clicks.
What was that? I don't remember that one.
So there were these little tiny cartridges that you put into this little tiny player, and they were not bands you would have listened to because I'm a bit younger. So It was like you could have like NSYNC and Hoku, and it played like 20 seconds of a song. And I don't remember, they were relatively expensive, but that was like a big deal thing. And you could like carry it around on a keychain, because of course keychains were like a big like fad in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so you could get your NSYNC and it would play like bye, 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 bye. And then it would just stop, and that's all you got of it. And then you'd have to hit play and it would play it again. But it sounded so bad.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's a toy. I don't remember this, and that's why I don't remember it, because that's a toy. That's not even like a forgotten form of physical music media, like the Sony mini disc was like this thing that tried to usurp CDs and it failed horribly. What is it called? Hero Clicks?
Hit clips.
Hit clips. Hit clips. That sounds like a toy. That's like, imagine.
It is a toy.
It is. It's literally a toy. Like you had like the musical toothbrushes. Like, can you imagine if like you're like, man, I don't have a computer. I can't afford CDs. I get all my music through my musical toothbrush.
Here's what they looked like.
Yeah, that's a toy.
Our internet's so slow. It's like not wanting to buffer. Come on, show the picture.
It's JPEG'd. It's appropriate that it's so JPEG'd.
Oh, and it came with the little, it was like a very early earbud. Like the little headphones went inside the ear, but they had those gross little foam things over it that you stuck inside your ear, and it was like...
Now, if Relient K wanted to be really cool, they should have released the Vinyl Countdown on
Here we go.
Hit Clips.
We've got the Bahamian, we got Pink, we have the A-Teens. I totally had the A-Teens one.
This is like tricking your child. This is like your kid wants a CD player, but you don't trust like the ability and the freedom they would have with that, and who knows what they're going to listen to and borrow Marilyn Manson CDs. You're afraid, so you give them this toy and you're like, here you go, this is your first CD player, and you trick your kid like my first tablet. And not even the ones that are actual tablets that play cartoons nowadays.
Like Leapfrog.
I mean like Leapfrog, or like a fake computer or a fake phone that has candy in it.
Oh man, I didn't realize they had Hit Clips, a video one called Video Jockey.
Right.
Now, I didn't know about this one. Create your own music video, edit dance routines for your whole Hit Clips collection. The graphics look like a Baby G watch. Like, I don't know if you ever had like a Baby G watch or anything like that, but I had one that had a little dolphin that was like the little pixelated dolphin like jumped over the thing.
This is a step down from watching Fairly Odd Parents on your Game Boy Advance. You know what I mean? This is like even less qualifies as physical media.
What are Hit Clips worth? According to mom.com, Hit Clips are worth $5 to $20 now.
That's, that information exists on the internet because someone's trying to get rid of their crap. And they're like, these have got to be worth something.
Yeah.
These have got
Here we go. Hit Clips is a digital audio player created by Tiger Electronics that plays low fidelity mono 1 minute clips of, so it was a full minute, 1 minute clips of pop songs from exchangeable cartridges. It first launched in August 2000 with 60-second microchip songs featuring Britney Spears, NSYNC, and Sugar Ray.
Honestly, like, there's no reason for something like that to exist except to trick your child into thinking they have their first CD or MP3 player.
And they had the boombox. Ooh, the Dream Groove Machine. Look, you can get that for $22 still on eBay.
So back to the song. The funny part about this song is the irony of how it's making a statement at teenagers of the year 2003 and saying, hey, you kids are too reliant on MP3s and burning CDs and doesn't...
Not reliant enough on Ks.
You're not reliant enough on Ks. Ks being the kilograms of vinyl, of wax that it takes to make these vinyl records. But even like as we were getting away from CDs, we were losing fidelity. You know that joke in I Love You Man where he's like, you never heard Rush? And then he starts playing Rush on his laptop laptop computer, and then like it sounds really bad, and they're like trying to gather around and put their ears against the laptop. Like there's this weird thing where like all throughout, like from boomers up through the 90s, people were concerned with fidelity. They wanted their music to sound good. If you loved music, you wanted to experience it in the best way possible. But then there's this thing, and I'm not ragging on millennials because I'm a millennial, but this was one of the worst things about millennials as far as stuff like this goes, is they were like, oh, I can get every song I want for free, and I can burn onto a CD and play it in my car. But that CD sounded like garbage because most of the MP3s you download would be in like 128 kilobytes, and it would sound really bad. Like I said, it would sound like you're listening to the radio, but the radio station is flooded. That's how bad it would sound. And kids, and then that generation grew up, and like we'd stop having like cool hi-fi. And I know as technology shrunk, like the room in our spaces had more value than having like a big stereo or something. But somehow we lost, like all these stereo stores start closing, but we lost the care of like having cool technology, good technology to be able to hear these things and to make sure that you're playing it in a format that those good speakers will actually play it in. I think we're getting back towards that now finally because of like, Beats and headphones, and I think a lot of celebrities, as they create like headphone companies and speaker companies, they are getting more towards fidelity, and people are realizing that is important. But I think there's this whole dark era of fidelity from pretty much like 1999 through something around like maybe 2014 or something. And it also kind of, the rise of that dark time ending also correlates right with like the rise of vinyl becoming something that people wanted to buy again, and realizing that it does sound better than CDs. And vinyl really are like neck and neck in terms of what sounds better, because there's certain fidelity on vinyl that you can't get on a CD, and certain fidelity you can get on a CD that you can't get on almost anything else. So it just depends on the recording and stuff like that.
I never like did the illegal download music thing, because I got a Mac when I was like 15.
Right.
And so I got iTunes and just purchased music through iTunes and then burned it onto CDs. And I don't remember it sounding that bad, but I wasn't as critical then. Obviously, I was listening to, I had just upgraded from hit clips, like.
Right. Well, I think that might have been the problem for our generation, is that like, whether it was legal or illegal, and early iTunes was low compression, because I remember criticisms and articles about why does iTunes insist on like only 192 kilobytes for these files, and like all these upstart companies that tried to immediately compete with iTunes, saying like you can get uncompressed formats or you can get way better compressions and stuff. And like part of the reason why BitTorrent became big in the early 2010s is because a lot of those like very private BitTorrent sites would be like, you can get great fidelity MP3s through an illegal format that you can't get through the legal formats. You know what I mean? So a lot of people, like cool people, would go and give their money to the band and then go on to private BitTorrent sites and download good compression MP3s or FLAC once it was available, or I don't know what uncompressed formats existed before FLAC, because I didn't get into it before then. So yeah, it's been this like climb back to thing. And I guess if you're a kid growing up in the 90s or earlier and you're interested in music, there's all these adults around you who give you their equipment and share things with you, and you realize fidelity is important. But then when you're a kid growing up in the 2000s and a millennial, then you just have a computer in front of you and you're like, oh, I can listen to every song ever right here. But you don't care because you just have the access to it, and no one's like, oh, well, you could use the CD. And you're like, yeah, but I don't want the CD. It's all right here. You know what I mean? So then like we lost things sounding good.
Well, it's a slow climb back to high fidelity. And with that, we're going to take our break.
Okay.
If you enjoy Sadie Hawkins Pod, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and interact with the show by calling our voicemail line, 402-95-SADIE.
You can send an email to sadiehawkinspod@gmail.com and visit our Instagram and Twitter, which are both @SadieHawkinspod.
You can also visit sadiehawkinspod.com for the link to our TeePublic store for shirts, mugs, and stickers, including 2 brand new designs. Following in the history of all of Relient K's logo parody merch, we have a Chick-fil-A parody design.
And to prove to everyone that we are in fact the most punk rock podcast, we have a new Black Flag logo parody. You know, something that's original and that we could really call our own for once.
We also want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/SadieHawkinsPod.
There's JR, Jarrett, Eric, Joel, Connor, Michael, Helen, Samantha, Roxanne, Jimmy Eat Pod, This Might Be a Podcast, Tucker, David, and Brady. You can sign up at our Patreon for bonus episodes, which include us reviewing the songs from K is for Karaoke and reading through the Complex Infrastructure book.
Ooh.
Treat yourself right in 2021 with Sadie Hawkins Pod, the door to a happy, healthy life.
So you like Relient K, do you? Well, what about They Might Be Giants? My name is Greg Simpson, and I host a They Might Be Giants fan podcast, and it's called This Might Be a Podcast. This Might Be a Podcast is a song-by-song podcast featuring a different guest every episode from normal fans like you and I, but also I've had guests such as John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats, Justin McElroy of My Brother and Me, Hutch Harris of the Thermals, Mike Park of Asian Man Records, Franz Nikolai of The Hold Steady, and Danny Weinkoff and Marty Beller of They Might Be Giants, and past drummers Dan Hickey and Brian Doherty. Search for Punk News or This Might Be a Podcast on any podcast platform and you will find us. This Might Be a Podcast, brought to you by punknews.org.
So we didn't get into it yet. Let's do it now. As I mentioned, the original 2003 vinyl has a completely different mix than what everyone knows from 2008. And unlike, say, For the Band, where the second I heard For the Band on Bird and the B-Sides, I was like, WTF? What's going on? They've changed the song. In this case, the only time I ever heard this the original Vinyl Countdown, was on those probably low compression MP3s back in 2003. So, and I didn't ironically, I never burnt that to a CD. I would just listen to it when I was sitting at the computer. So I didn't For the Band I heard all the time because I constantly played the Employee of the Month CD all the time.
Right.
So when I heard Vinyl Countdown, I was like, sounds good. Sounds the same to me. Couldn't tell the difference. But now going back and hearing this 2003 vinyl rip that's uploaded by Derek, that's just their YouTube name, Derek, it's clear. Actually, let's play... Oh, this is actually a rip of the entire EP. It's an 8-minute rip of the entire EP, so when we do Nothing Without You, we'll be able to hear the differences there too. But first, let's remind everyone what it sounds like on Bird and the B-Sides. So there's the version that everybody knows. And here is how it sounded in 2003. So the clearest thing, first of all, they added that little hip-hop thing, right, as if a hip-hop record is playing for a second and then it stops. That's added from Burn the B-Sides. Second is that the sound of the lead guitar sounds completely more. It sounds more punk. It sounds more raw. It's raw, way more raw.
Yeah.
But that other, that's what would you call that? That other thing, that second guitar when it comes in, that sounds pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I'm sure the mix might be polished, but they definitely
it's bassier too.
Without knowing enough about music engineering, you could tell me they completely changed that first guitar, they completely replaced it, or they just polished up what they had. I can't tell, you know what I mean? I can tell that when that part comes in, I can tell that's the same part. But I can't entirely tell from my limited musical critical ear if the first guitar is the same or not, if they replaced it.
I want to say it sounds different because it does sound a lot looser.
It clearly sounds different, so... And that's the other thing, is they put Thiessen's lyrics in the 2003 version through a dirty filter. I'm assuming on purpose. And I have to assume that this isn't the mix of the YouTube video. You can hear the crackles. I think that the crackles are actually from Derek putting this on YouTube, and his copy that's almost 20 years old. Probably this was uploaded 3 years ago, so his copy that's something like 16 years old, being a little worn out.
Back when our parents were in college, we weren't even born, and neither were CDs. Cause when our folks listen to their rock and roll, they gather around and play it on their turntables. But these days, the records are all worthless, cause DJs switch the records on purpose. So let's put this into perspective, in the present day in which we live.
I mean, it's flat out heavier. This version is flat out heavier, and it could be, like I said, something about the way that it was ripped from audio. If I took a Relient K track and put it on YouTube, I could just increase the bass. I could just run it through an audio editor and mess with it, and people would assume that's the way it is. So unless we hear it, we get our hands on an actual copy, we don't exactly know. But the guitar is just a little grungier, a little heavier, and the Bird and the B-Sides version has that post polish, that gold version polish, where they remove some of this human element. That's always what I come back to with the gold remixes, is they remove and also I'm thinking that this is what I think when I think of polished punk. It's removing as much of the human element as possible, removing as much of like hearing the fingers sliding up the strings, hearing the bass strings sort of reverberate against the pickups, like removing the idea that this is an instrument held by a human. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's what I hear when I hear now, having heard this YouTube video, what I think of when I hear the polish on Vinyl Countdown on Burden the B-Sides.
It's all the same with all the kids. No one knows what vinyl is.
And that's got to be way different. No one
Yeah.
knows. Let's take that one more time, and then I'll play the 2008 mix.
It's all the same with all the kids. No one knows what vinyl is. 'Cause they just burn the MP3s.
So here's how No One Knows What Vinyl is on the 2008 version.
Let's put this into perspective. In the present day in which we live, it's all the same with all the kids. No one knows what vinyl is. 'Cause
They put
The filter,
filter on No One Knows What Vinyl is in the original. Like, they really polished it up. They really polished this. They made it less... And I'm guessing in 2003, the statement they're making, releasing a 7-inch, where the lead song is about, hey kids, why aren't you listening to 7 inches? Some people might think, oh, I should be into vinyl because vinyl is an old format where, you know, you got the Moody Blues and you got all this jazz. But the thing is, in the punk sense, vinyl was always a huge important thing because it was the cheapest active place for the, you know, hardcore bands in Huntington Beach to release physical media back then. It was on 7 inches, so their grimy, grungy, like barely know how to play punk music was released on 7 inches back then. So they kind of made the 2003 mix of this song sound a little grungier, sound a little bit more raw, like they don't know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, and I love the statement being made there with that filter of that like tinny, like burned onto your blank CD sound.
Right. And then there's one other thing that I'm sure everyone has heard a million times if they've listened to Burden the B-Sides, where the slowed down pretty part, you hear someone in the background right before it kicks back in for the outro go rock and roll. So let's listen to the 2008 mix of the last minute of the song, and then we'll compare it to the last minute of the 2003 mix.
'Cause they just burn the MP3s onto their stacks of blank CDs. And during all that arsony, the records stay right in their sleeves. It's all the same.
So you heard that, right? Mm-hmm. Right before they get into that final chorus, you hear rock and roll.
With all the kids, no one knows what vinyl is.
And then that version of the chorus carries us to the end of the song. So now let's hear that same section on the 2003 version.
No one knows what vinyl is. 'Cause they just burn the MP3s onto their stacks of blank CDs. And during all that arsony, the records stay right in their sleeves.
I believe any of the warble you're hearing right now would be from Derek's YouTube rip, not
player,
the actual,
yeah.
not what's actually in the master.
I prefer the drums in the 2003 version. They're so like prominent in the 2008 version, and they're mixed like higher.
Gotcha. I haven't taken note of that.
It's all the same with all the kids.
So I don't hear the rock and roll, at least on this YouTube rip. Let's go back one more 30 seconds.
It's all the same with all the kids.
If it's in there, which I absolutely don't hear it, maybe I'll hear it in when we edit the episode, but I absolutely don't hear it right now. I don't hear the rock and roll. So that's probably an addition. Or the Aquabats completely remastered their Fury of the Aquabats album. That's their big album the one that has Travis Barker on, the last one with Travis Barker on it. It's the one that's got all the big songs, Magic Chicken and Super Rad and stuff. They completely remastered it in, I think, 2019 or 18. And there's so much stuff, so many talking about fidelity and how mixes completely change things. They, as far as I know, they didn't re-record any elements, didn't dub anything in, but there's so many little things that you can't hear in the mix in the originals that you hear in the mix when they fixed it up and changed it. It's almost like, you know, when you mixing I would have to imagine that mixing music is almost like an endless possibility in a lot of ways. Like sometimes you think like, oh, this obvious, sometimes it might be obvious depending on the type of song you're doing, but almost like writing a novel with no preset idea or no pre-written out story. It's literally an endless possibility of like what comes up, where do I go, what do I do in the story, or what do I put higher, what do I put lower, what do I put high in the mix? If there's a weird little funny mistake of someone talking, do I leave that in there? Do I not leave it in there? So this Aquabats album has all those kind of bells and whistles that you missed in the original, and it just reminds me of this. This reminds me of that.
No one knows what vinyl is.
Oh, and did you hear that? Leading up to this last repeat of the chorus at the end of the 2003 mix, there was like an echo. I don't even know if it counts as a reverb, but it was an echo on the last like sustain of what he was singing. Here, I'll play it again.
No one knows what vinyl is. So let's put this into perspective. In the present day in which we live, it's all the same with all the kids. No one knows what vinyl is.
So there's that. Now I'm wondering if the mix of Fiverr and Frenzy. Well, the rip sounds blown out, but I don't think they too greatly changed the mix of Fiverr and Frenzy. I didn't even say what I was doing, but now we've already done Fiverr and Frenzy as Dead or Dying, and I'm like, did they change the mix of those?
Right. Sounds about the same.
Sounds about the same. This sounds
cleaner,
wetter.
Yeah.
But I don't know, again, I can't tell if that wetness is the vinyl rip or
exactly,
not.
Yeah.
But the changes in even with not knowing what's Derek's fault or not, there's so many clear changes in Vinyl Countdown.
Well, not him, but maybe his record player.
I don't mean fault. I mean, what's Derek's, what sonic things in this YouTube video are Derek's doing, on purpose or not. Yeah, so there's that. And I didn't have a ton of notes on the song specifically, other than talking about the history of vinyl and burning CDs and MP3s. Did you see that viral tweet where a Gen Zer said, honestly, what's burning a CD?
Oh, no.
Someone said that, and it got ratioed.
Because we didn't have Bluetooth.
Right. They didn't know what burning a CD was, and if you don't know, if someone doesn't know, it's making a CD. It's putting your MP3s into a program.
It's like a mixtape.
It's a mixtape.
It's a playlist that you put on a CD.
Yeah. I don't think there's a better word than burning a CD, because I guess I don't know where the etymology for that comes from, but it's like you got a CD, it's blank, you're burning songs into it with a blowtorch, or like the laser. There's a laser that puts the songs into it, so the laser's burning the songs into it. I guess that might be the etymology for that. Who knows what these Silicon Valley eggheads are thinking when they come up with some of this stuff. And the way they control our media nowadays and the information that gets to us.
I just love this song. It's rockin'. It comes on. You start hopping up and down and dancing to it. It's good stuff. So in my deep dive, we have new release today, their post for the original pressing. Release date, August 1st, 2003. And I just realized on our break, I put my Invisalign back in right before I had to do all the talking.
Well, real quick, we didn't talk about Europe and the song Final Countdown. It's a pun on the song Final Countdown. We all know it. It goes like this. This is the band Europe, the Swedish rock band from Sweden, and their famous song, Final Countdown.
I'm just shaking my head at him.
And right now, Europe is either dead or dying. This is Five Iron Frenzy. Just... I'm waiting until you say something.
The Vinyl Countdown is the 4th EP by Christian rock band Relient K. It's basically just the Wikipedia page.
Right. This is the Final Countdown by Europe. Classic, cheesy keyboard. The band is known for both opening and closing their shows with this song. To prepare for this episode, I tried listening to some. I'm like, what are the other Europe songs? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, even listening to them, and I'm like, okay, this is a pretty big song, Carrie.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, I tried to deep dive on them, and I was like, you know. And Rock the Night is their 3rd biggest song on Spotify. We're still going to get flagged for this. We're already getting flagged for a lot of stuff. Five Iron Frenzy's going to take this episode down. And Open Your Heart is their 5th biggest song. And another version of Final Countdown is their 4th biggest song on Spotify. So.
They're no Survivor. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You can dive so deep into Survivor. So good. I have another post. It's a Facebook post from the official Relient K Facebook from the repress. It says, Relient K, going back to our punk rock roots, we decided to make some limited edition 7-inch releases. We have several of this type of series planned over the next year. At the end, there will be a limited edition box available to store all your 7-inch copies in. This is series 1. Each 7-inch is limited to 1,000 units. The Creepy 7-inch. Side A, Softer to Me Acoustic. Side B, Jefferson Airplane Original Version. The Vinyl Countdown 1. Side A, The Vinyl Countdown. Side B, Five Iron Frenzy is Either Dead or Dying. The Vinyl Countdown 2. Side A, Nothing Without You. Side B, Five Iron Frenzy is Either Dead or Dying ska version. And then it has a link to superfanvinyl.com.
Right. Yeah, some of the...
And only 2 people like that post, what? I'm confused now.
Some of the 7-inch series are easy to get, and some of them are getting up there. It just depends. I guess it depends on what songs people want on 7-inch and which ones people don't care.
Then we have the Vinyl Countdown Llc. It's just another company with the same name. Find roofing tenders in Newfoundland, thin carpet for purchase in Oklahoma City, roofing store in Manchester. I don't really know what they do here, but so to the best of our knowledge, we are doing our best to fight technology, because back when OU, the company's filing status is listed, there's so many typos here, listed as active, and its filing number is 425911150K. Contact us about the company profile for the Vinyl Countdown LLC. And then they are also selling a bunch of random stuff. Like, I don't know what this website is. It has a weird website name. It's championlockhart2ja.web.app.
Yeah, you got a virus on your phone now.
Probably. The sacrifices I make for the podcast. And then it's like, there's a picture of different colors you can choose, and like a wardrobe and like a printer. It's very strange. Like, I don't know what this website is.
Yeah. Also, the phrase Vinyl Countdown is obviously, I think it's an easily parallel thinking pun. I'm sure Relient K wasn't the first to come up with it, and they haven't been the last, certainly.
Then we've got a Reddit post. This was posted by Awesomest Gotee 4 years ago under r/Relient K. Relient K 7-inch issues and some ideas for SMLXL. I have nearly had a problem with every set. Most are nitpicks, but some are just strange and don't make sense. I have some ideas on how they can fix these issues. I feel it is such a cool idea, but the execution is a little puzzling. First of all, one of the biggest draws to the vinyl is the artwork. 7 inches are a little smaller, but they still deserve decent artwork, and the 7-inch series is seriously lacking with artwork. I understand it's cheaper this way. My only hope is they include a booklet or slips with the artwork and liner notes.
I don't know if it's cheaper. I don't know if that's why they did it.
I thought it was a stylistic choice.
I think it's just a stylistic choice.
And I kind of like it. It's like a back to basics, like kind of roots thing that I enjoy.
I don't think, I'm sure those cardboard sleeves weren't cheap, to be honest. Like, and they're very specific to that thing. I don't see that specific kind of cardboard sleeve. So I doubt very much that, like, if you just went ahead and got like a paper printed thing, especially nowadays, like, there are companies that just print cards and t-shirts and mugs for the cheapest possible thing. Right. I don't think printing stuff, although this is like 8 years ago or something, still it doesn't. I don't think the cardboard and the sticker.
Yeah, the Reddit post was from 4 years ago.
Actually, the way they do it with that cardboard sleeve that is very specific to their releases, with that sticker with the very minimal artwork on it, I would imagine that has to be very expensive because you're buying 2 separate materials, and then you need some sort of machine, or you need people putting those stickers on there very securely and correctly. So I can't imagine that is cheaper than just printing out some paper and putting it in a plastic sleeve like a typical 7 inches.
I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling down because I'm like, OMG, this is such a long post. And I love that the first comment from 4 years ago, City Electric Records just responded, whoa. Followed by Silent Ransom replied, best response. But without going further in, because it's a lot of just nitpicky stuff. Row B 990 4 years ago replied, regarding the 7-inch artwork issue, they have it as minimalistic artwork to represent each of these different parts of the album and EPs. These specific sections are taken from. With the release of Series 1, SMLXL stated that when this RK 7-inch is done, they'll release a box set to store all of the 7 inches in. SMLXL confirmed that this box will release sometime this year. This was done to save costs, but also to make the box look super cool too. A couple years back, Green Day released a couple similar box sets, a 7-inch box set and a studio album box set, 1990 to 2009. Even though the individual artworks were recreations of the originals, the box itself had some really awesome art on it. I feel that the box holding our Relient K 7 inches will look just as cool. In regards to splitting songs on different discs, I'll agree with you there. I personally don't understand why SMLXL split the Vinyl Countdown onto 2 discs when all 4 tracks were originally on 1. When collecting albums from them, I've noticed they add a bunch of spacing from the center hole to where the grooves of each song are. On the original, the grooves are a lot closer to the center of the record than on the 10-year replica.
Figuring out what I know about Relient K from our interview in a little bit with Brad Moist and other things we've heard, I'm sure the onus of that decision is probably on Relient K. Like, I would assume that is what Hoops and Thiessen wanted specifically, especially since Hoops is a huge fidelity guy.
Right.
That's why he has his pedal company, I'm sure. And he is, and like Hoops was like the project manager basically, or whatever. He was the one who made the decision on the Air for Free total reworking of the vinyl. So I would have to imagine that the fact that there were only 2 songs on each of the ongoing 7-inch series is Relient K's decision and not SMLXL. And if you don't like it, I mean, don't blame it on someone outside of the band. I have to imagine that is exactly how they envisioned it for whatever reason, whether it's just like, it's just cool, it's limited, it's like 2 songs on each thing.
It's wow. And then this person continues to just go on and on and on about really like intricate detailed stuff about like our like specific 0.01 whatever RPMs and such. So I really only was like, oh, this is kind of interesting and there's not a lot out there. So I pulled this up and I was going to say, I thought their issue was going to be the one thing that I do have an issue with on RK Vinyl is just really with the all work and no playlist album, where if we're going to put it on, we put on our test pressings.
Right.
Because both copies of our vinyl that we got are
because we really wanted we really wanted 2 t-shirts.
Right.
So I ordered 2 copies just so I could get 2 t-shirts. And they both came a little warped. And it was kind of distressing. But we were like, well, we also did the test pressing order. So, and I think it all really comes down to the fact that black vinyl is king. Black vinyl is king. Colored vinyl, splatter vinyl, it's cool and all, but it sounds worse than black vinyl. When it comes to me buying a record, if there is a black vinyl copy of it, I always go with that. Colored vinyl is really just from like a collecting and an aesthetic reason. If you actually buy records to listen to, you should always go for the black vinyl.
Yeah, so I have a post from yoursoundmatters.com. Does colored vinyl sound worse than black vinyl? And this is from May 25th, 2020. Colored vinyl gets a bad rap among vinyl and hi-fi circles. For years, colored pressings were infamous for lousy quality. They are subsequently cast aside to this day by many as little more than a marketing gimmick. But is this really fair? Can the color of a vinyl record really make that much difference? On face value, a debate around how color might affect the sound quality of one pressing over another appears inconsequential, almost smoke and mirrors. As with most things, though, when you dig a little deeper, you begin to see the wood from the trees, a little method in the madness. To help decipher truth from fiction, we spoke to Matt Early of Gotee Records, a pressing plant based in Cleveland, Ohio. Matt was able to provide a fantastic insight into the trials and tribulations of working with different colors and the vinyl manufacturing process. When I first began investing in vinyl color and the impact on production quality, it became apparent pretty quickly that I was approaching a continuous topic. Most of the information available online is shrouded in pseudoscience, and of those I spoke to directly, many of their answers were inconclusive or ambiguous. At the same time, I think it's important to stress that while Matt was extremely helpful and forthcoming with his knowledge, he can only speak for his own unique experience at Gotee Records. Speak to a different plant, and their experience may or may not vary entirely. I'm skipping forward a little bit to where they get to the answer.
Okay.
All vinyl records are made of PVC, which naturally has no color. It appears white, but can show light through if held up to a light source. To change the appearance of natural PVC, colorants are added to the mix. In the case of traditional black records, black carbon is often added, which also strengthens the PVC mix. As a general rule of thumb, traditional black vinyl and natural uncolored vinyl produce the best results overall. Matt explains further, certainly with our black vinyl, carbon is used as a colorant. As far as I understand, this can reduce static electricity, but the biggest contributor to black vinyl performance is more down to the fact that it's the most prevalent color. It's the most often run, and therefore it's the most consistent. When we switch from black to colored vinyl on any of our pressings, there's a lot of finesse involved in changing over as all materials run dramatically different. Whereas with black vinyl, you can run that on any press on any day, and while every record runs a little differently, you know the vinyl itself is going to be pretty consistent. For me, this is the biggest overriding factor in why black is said to sound better.
Okay, so that makes sense. So maybe my prejudice against colored vinyl isn't scientifically based just in it was always my understanding that the material used for the color actually sounded worse when the needle hits it. If that's not scientifically based in fact, I'm willing to redo my thinking. But so now what I'm understanding, and this also makes sense, and I think I heard this as well, is if you're going to do a colored vinyl, the presser has to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They have to know what material they're putting in, and they probably have to calibrate the machine to properly account for that. And I'm guessing maybe that has something to do with why our white vinyl copies of All Work and No Playlist arrived to us warped. And I don't think that necessarily, I don't know what SMLXL's printing plant is, but vinyl companies have to also rely on printing companies.
Yeah.
Like SMLXL doesn't print I don't think they can, from everything I understand about the industry. They can't print their own vinyl. So who knows what they used and what material that white vinyl was made out of, and they probably didn't calibrate something in the machine correctly and it came out warped, and I don't know.
It says, I'm scrolling down a little bit, and It says, in the manufacturing process, of course, there are always exceptions. Every record runs differently, and there are no doubt variables from one pressing to the next, let alone one pressing plant to the next. We've certainly found exceptions to the black is best rule. There are some records we've run that seem to run much better on transparent color for whatever reason. Just the way the grooves form seems to work better in some instances. For example, sometimes when you have a record that has a lot of molding issues, like non-fill on black vinyl, much of those molding issues can go away due to the softer nature of colored vinyl. As my conversation with Matt unfolds, what becomes clear is that color itself does not directly affect the sound quality of a record. Instead, the difference in performance lies more in how each material molds. The reason different colors have varying sound characteristics on vinyl is because of how they mold, Matt continues. A contributor in how they mold is what's used as the colorant. So, for example, when we run a white record, in our experience, we find this to be one of the noisiest colors. When white vinyl is mixed with other colors, this only serves to exacerbate the issue further. I don't want to say they're generally terribly fallible records all the time, but if you were to compare one with, say, the exact same record on black, you'd likely hear a difference. So with black vinyl, we know the colorant is always going to be carbon, but with other colors, the colorant may vary from one to the next, and this introduces a variable.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And I don't even know if we own any picture discs, but I think picture discs, from what I understand, are like just like they sound the worst. Like even people who debate colored vinyl, I think everyone hates the sound of picture discs.
Yeah, I think we own like one, and it was like a record store day release, I believe.
Right.
I can't think of who it is though.
Gotcha. Well, then we are entering the Vinyl Countdown towards our interview, but I do have there aren't really a lot of things on YouTube, nothing on SoundCloud, but I do have two things to play, and the only other version of the song that I found is Thiessen playing this song acoustic 7 years ago. This is uploaded by Kara Grindstaff on May 5th, 2013. They wrote underneath, we only got part recorded, but the crowd started... Oh, that's right. And it's Freebird. He does Freebird acoustic, and then he does Vinyl Countdown.
Oh, how nice.
So it says, we only got part of Freebird recorded because the crowd started screaming Freebird. So Matt started singing it, his own special version, which we'll also hear. We also got part of the Vinyl Countdown before the phone died. Their very first time performing that song. Cat's Cradle... Carborough, North Carolina, May 2nd, 2013. Here's Thiessen playing Vinyl Countdown on acoustic guitar. And it just ends there because their battery died.
Nice.
We'll hear a little bit of the Freebird thing, but one thing I forgot to mention as well in the lyrics is he says, nowadays the records are all worthless. And yeah, throughout the 90s into the 2000s, part of the reason why the records had such a boom now is because in order for something to become really valuable and collectible, I can't remember the name of this principle, but there's a principle in which for something to become a collectible, it has to become worthless first, which is why people who try to speculate on, like, say, a comic book, like they go out and they buy issue 100 of The Walking Dead because they're like, this is going to get my kids through college someday. Or Beanie Babies was probably the biggest example. The thing was, they printed those things in the millions knowing that people would want it. They built a hype around it. So it will take forever to become worthless because there's so many copies out there, because something basically has to become worthless before it can truly become collectible. And that's why it's like a complete crapshoot when you have like a random CD or record in your collection that you bought at the time and suddenly it's worth like $500. Like I have a copy of Life in General from MXPX that I bought from Tooth and Nail's own store for like $5. That's another early vinyl that I owned. I was like, oh, cool, Life in General. And I was more thinking like I probably wouldn't listen to it on my grandmother's record player, but I was more thinking like, oh, I'd love to have a large copy of the Life in General cover for $5. Why not? And now that record's worth hundreds of dollars, and I didn't buy it thinking it would ever be worth anything. So let's hear a little bit of Matt playing Freebird. So I guess that's it. He didn't really even play it. He just went Freebird, like David Lynch.
Petition for Relient K when they come back to play...
actually play Freebird?
No, to play this version of Freebird instead of Deathbed.
I think that's... And now it's just 3 minutes of chatter with the crowd. So he doesn't actually even play Freebird. He does it as a joke.
It's great. I love it.
That's great.
Should be every show.
So there's two music videos, two fan music videos. There's also a really rare 90s like EDM sort of music band, like I don't know, called Vinyl Countdown, and this is what they sound like. I'm taking a little side.
I was going to ask if it was Rednecks.
It's not Rednecks. I've been obsessed with that song recently.
He has. Can confirm.
So this is like Prodigy. Whatever the band Prodigy.
Yes.
So whatever genre of electronic music Prodigy is, that's what the Vinyl Countdown the band sounded like. There you go. There's that. Apparently they're really rare and hard to like suss out exactly who they were. And just someone uploaded their records to YouTube. So there's two FMVs, and I guess since there's so few, I can actually give them full credit. This one's rather simple. It's uploaded by Katie Falls, Katie with an IE. It's only got 55 views after 9 years. And it's got this weird frame around it in the editing software, but it's just them in their bedrooms with their hoodies up, because I guess of the hip hop thing at the beginning, they come walking into the shot, like acting all hip hop or whatever, but then they start rocking out. And there's not much to it. There's not really any editing. It's just them in their creepy bedroom dancing around to the song. But this is Leah B, Leabbee, and we've seen her before, and she does these like high effort by herself, edited, like also in a bedroom, but edited in high effort, like comedic things where she's really like acting it up for the camera, and like we talked about her when she did some other song, because we were like pressing on, and we were like, this seems like she wants to be on SNL one day. Because this is Leah B Studios 4 years ago, 228 views. So here she is. I don't know how to describe it except it's like highly edited, constantly cutting to different shots, and she made it by herself, and she's just putting so much. There's so much effort here. And it's great to put and it's well shot because it's only 4 years ago. She has iPhones. She's holding up iPhones, and it's funny how. Did we even talk about it? How we talked about it a little bit. How it completely changed. The scene completely changed. Like not only is vinyl actually more popular today than it was in 2003, but MP3s and CDs have completely gone by the wayside. Like, people don't even download MP3s anymore. People stream.
Yeah, I love that she went to open her window and throw the vinyl, but she didn't cut fast enough, so you see her hesitate and then, then cut, like she wasn't actually going to throw it.
Leah B is very super creative. Even her bedroom is creative. Like, she puts a lot of effort into this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's all I really have. There's not a ton for this song on YouTube, but we do have our interview with Brad Moist. As I mentioned, he works for Gotee Records. He does a lot of their social media. I didn't know this until the interview, but Gotee Records is really like only 4 people.
Wow.
So he wears a lot of hats at the company, but he's been with them for decades. He had some time off here and there. He's going to talk about that. And he created Mono versus Stereo Records before Matt took it over after Bird and the B-Sides. Brad started it. And Jessica, what do you think of this song? Do you like it better, the same, or less than before?
I think I like it even better.
I think I like it even better now, and I'm actually going to go back and listen to that 2003 mix.
Yeah, same, because I really enjoyed the mix of that one. Yeah,
and unlike
the production on it.
Unlike the second and third album gold versions, where there's 2000, there's non-gold mixes that I absolutely prefer over the gold mixes, and gold mixes I absolutely prefer over the non-gold. I like both versions of Vinyl Countdown equally for different reasons. So, on to the interview.
So let's put this into perspective. In the present day in which we live, it's all the same with all the kids. No one knows what vinyl is.
So we're joined by Brad Moist, who works for Gotee Records. Last year, right as the pandemic was starting up, you had hit us up on our comments and you said if we ever wanted to have you on the podcast to let you know. And then we both kind of like forgot because of the pandemic really got going. And then I reached out again this month, and I was like, oh, the year went by real fast. And luckily, you were still interested in doing the podcast, and we're really glad to have you on. You let me know that, obviously you work for Gotee Records, and then you let us know that you founded Mono versus Stereo. So that's when we got really interested, because we basically have no real understanding about the history of mono versus stereo. So I'm excited to learn about that. First, I let everyone know sort of your background and what is exactly you do with Gotee Records and how you came to work for them.
Well, I've been at Gotee Records for over 20 years. The label's been around for almost 27 now.
Okay.
Right out of college, I went to Penn State, and then just kind of worked my way up. They offered me a part-time job, and then it was a full-time job at the label doing marketing and festival promotions. And that's how I got to know the Relient K guys. And then after 2 years of doing that, I really just had a vision for something else. I saw what was happening with the Relient K guys, and I just thought, man, we need to have like more rock bands that we need to work with, but we need to do it differently than what Gotee was doing. So I pitched Toby and Joey, who are the owners of Gotee, the idea of mono versus stereo. And they really liked it because it was different budgets financially than what Gotee was doing. It was going to be cheaper, and then just more indie rock, punk rock records and different styles than what Gotee was doing. And the Relient K guys were extremely supportive from the very beginning, always wearing the stickers and their shirts and putting the stickers on their amps and things. And we just had a really good friendship early on. And so the first release from Mono versus Stereo came out in June of 2003. And Matt contributed a solo song from Matt Thiessen and the Earthquakes, which is the first song that he ever put out, Poison Ivy. And that was just kind of the start of their involvement with the record label. So, and then during that time, we started talking about the second release for the record label. And this is before the vinyl boom was happening, and I was always a fan of what Tooth and Nail did back in the day of just 7 inches of B-sides and things like that. And so I thought, why don't we do a 7-inch? And the guys were making the Two Lefts record, and I knew there was a bunch of songs that didn't make the record. And so the initial conversations were to put on some of the B-sides from Two Lefts onto a 7-inch and make it exclusive on the Mono versus Stereo website and at the band shows.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I was always curious about the. So in researching before talking to you today, I actually found out some of the answers, but I was always confused on some of the timeline of how Mono versus Stereo began, and interested in how the Vinyl Countdown 7-inch kind of came to be, because it was so cool. It was like before they were making such, like Relient K made such a statement specifically with that release. It felt like here's a 7-inch, and like maybe some underground punk bands and bands like that would still have 7 inches in vinyl. But yeah, vinyl wasn't like in a boom at the time. So and definitely the kind of audience that Relient K would have had at that time wouldn't be would they were kind of speaking directly to them with some of those lyrics, right? Like talking about, burning MP3s and only having CDs. So they're like making such a specific statement to their fans at the time. It felt like by releasing a 7-inch and having it be about vinyl. So I'm actually interested to realize if this is what you're saying, that Vinyl Countdown was maybe written as a song for the album, but then it got held back for this specific 7-inch. Is that the case?
So to go back a little bit, so in typical record industry stuff, most artists release a record and there's 10 songs on a record, and a record label pays out on usually just 10 songs.
Okay.
On every record that Relient K did, they always, what we would call over deliver. They always put more songs on a record than they needed to. And in between each record and before each record, they always put out an EP. Every year for a long time, they always had a piece of content out in the marketplace. And so they'd already done 3 EPs with 3 records. And so the next thought was, let's do a vinyl one. And the initial idea was just to take B-sides, songs they didn't finish for 2 Lefts. We're Nothing Without You was one of them, and a couple other songs, and let's just make a 7-inch around that. Well, as conversations started happening with me and Thiessen, just classic Thiessen, man, he's just like, well, I can go write this song, and I can go write this song. And during that time, the announcement came out that Five Iron Frenzy was calling it quits. So he's like, I'm going to go write a song about Five Iron Frenzy calling it quits. And then we decided to work with the band's fan club at the time, the RK fan club, and write a song for a fan. Jesse Alkire was the fan that we kind of put on the cover of the album art. And that came up with the theme for the Vinyl Countdown. And of course, classic Thiessen, it was a play on words with the Final Countdown by the band Europe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So all that kind of wrapped up. It kind of morphed from B-sides into, well, let's include this Fire Iron Frenzy song. It was only supposed to be like 30 seconds and just one song. But then Matt delivered 2 versions because that's what Matt does. He always over delivers.
Right.
And then this whole idea with the fan club. So it kind of started out in one way of just B-sides and then morphed into this whole piece, which was really cool. I mean, again, the band over delivered, but it was a way to constantly, for every year, for them to be delivering music to their fan base. You know what I mean? Which I always thought was a great way to grow their fan base early on.
Yeah.
So.
That's cool. Yeah, that's great to know some of the actual background of that song. I remember I've been listening to Relient K since the first album. Like, I walked in a store and I saw, the self-titled cover, and I'm like, this looks like my kind of music, just seeing that cover. So I was seeing them like every year in those, in the quartet era. And it was cool how Relient K made that 2003 like partially a celebration of Five Iron Frenzy, and to put it on this EP and to play that song at all the shows, and then to play their to play Five Iron Frenzy's final show when they weren't on that entire Five Iron Frenzy tour. It seemed like such a like a camaraderie, and they were like, really celebrating that thing, along with this other cool idea of having, pushing vinyl on a specific section of kids that probably weren't really interested in it. But then when Vinyl Countdown came out, I was like, maybe I should order that. And I've kicked myself ever since that I didn't order an original, get an original copy of Vinyl Countdown. I've always regretted that I didn't. It was like such a missed opportunity.
We didn't, I didn't know, because look, I was a fan. I think I mentioned, Tooth and Nail had done 7 inches early on. Small Town Minds by MXPX was 7 inches. They'd done, Starflare 59 had a 7-inch for the song Next Time Around, which was never on one of their records. And I loved that as a fan, and so did the Relient K guys. And so that's what this piece was supposed to be, was to kind of honor that. But at the time, I didn't know how many we would sell. So we only made 1,500, and we sold out. And I was just like, oh my gosh. But then it just became a thing like, well, I think we just keep it to that pressing. We didn't repress it. The other thing too that was kind of frustrating was when we did it, now we know about terminology called mastering for vinyl and different things. And back then when we mastered it, we didn't master for vinyl because I didn't really know what I was doing early on.
Okay.
And it didn't turn out sounding that great. The vinyl really didn't sound that good. And so we just kind of let it just be that thing for the 1,500. You know what I mean? But then, 5 years later, when the band was working on the Bird and the B-sides, we went back in and remixed all those songs you know, it was a lot of fun, man. You know, the Relient K guys were so supportive of Mono versus Stereo early on because at the time they were the only rock band on Gotee. And that was the kind of music that I was really into. And so for me working at Gotee, it was really about Relient K and John Rubin and Grits, you know, and I loved all the other artists, but those were like my passion artists. And so when I was given the opportunity to start Mono versus Stereo through Gotee, the Relient K guys were just extremely supportive, you know, like stickers on the amp cases and always wearing the t-shirts. I mean, they took out the Evan Anthem, which is the first band we put out on Mono versus Stereo. They took out that band on the Everybody Wants to Rule the World tour with Amber Lynn, that fall of 2003. And they were just always supportive of Mono versus Stereo in those early years while I was running it. And it was just a lot of fun. And I mean, Matt Thiessen co-produced this band Last Tuesday. It was a punk band I signed to label. He co-produced their debut record on Mono versus Stereo. Like I said, they contributed a song to the first Mono versus Stereo compilation as Matt Thiessen and the Earthquake. And there was a lot of camaraderie and friendship because we're all friends. We're all still friends to this day. So it was just a lot of fun. And the Vinyl Countdown was just a fun piece to be a part of. And looking back, like I said, you know, it was way ahead of the vinyl boom. I mean, the vinyl boom probably didn't really hit till about 2010 when you could see it starting to pick up, you know, and we were way ahead of that. So this is a little kind of nugget too, is that so then in 2004, when they released I thought, okay, in 2005, we're going to do a vinyl version of and we're going to put the B-side, Apathetic Way to Be, on that. So we pressed up on vinyl for the first time in 2005. And I thought, okay, we manufactured 1,500 copies of the Vinyl Countdown. We sold out like in a month and a half. Surely we could sell 3,000 copies in 2005 of on vinyl. Well, it didn't move. That stuff just sat in the Gotee warehouse for years.
Wow.
And it just didn't sell. People weren't into it in 2005, 6, 7, you know? And we ended up having to sell a lot of it to like a retailer just to get it out of the warehouse. And then 2010, when we started doing vinyl more with House of Heroes and Relient K releases, I think we did the first re-release of on vinyl in like maybe 13 or 14 and just sold like a bunch of them. You know, it was just crazy to think like the first time we pressed it on vinyl, we couldn't sell 3,000 units. But then later we probably sold 5 different color variations of that thing now, you know? Because the vinyl boom is just totally different, you know?
Yeah. It's funny how the song itself, for being such a statement at the time, that was something so, you know, cool for Relient K to be doing, like making this statement about vinyl, like, and how come people don't know vinyl anymore? And why are you all obsessed with MP3s, and how it's completely flipped, and how like younger Relient K fans today probably hear that song and they're like, what? Because they're like, there was a tweet that went viral recently, like in the last week or two, that somebody like a Gen Zer was like, they tweeted, honestly, I'm asking, what is burning a CD? And then like people lost, you know, millennials and older lost their minds. And somebody on Twitter like quoted Vinyl Countdown, and we retweeted that. But it's just so funny how it completely flipped. And you just answered a mystery we had on this podcast back when we did the Apathetic Way to Be song, because I totally missed when it turns out it was you, when you put together the first vinyl, because then when I went on Discogs, when I was trying to figure out, you know, why is Apathetic Way to Be in the middle, why is it on the playlist of the reissue vinyls, and why is it on 10 where it is instead of being at the end where all the other B-sides are? And then I found on Discogs the listing for the original 2005 vinyl, and I'm like, oh, it was here on the 2005 vinyl, and I could never wrap my head around it, but I was like, I'm never entirely sure why. So I'm glad you kind of like answered that question without me even thinking to ask you about it.
Well, that was intentional from Thiessen and Hoops and Townsend to put that song in that part of the sequence, which I thought was really cool to do, to not just put it at the end of the record. Because, you know, on that record, I know we're going off topic, but at that record, it closes with a completely different song. And so to throw Apathetic at the end of that, you just wouldn't want that after When I Go Down. You know what I mean? And so it made sense to put it within the record where it was originally supposed to be, you know? Yeah, man, I don't know. We just had a lot of fun back in those days with Relient K. And, you know, like I said, it was weird to go from, let's just put a bunch of B-sides, and then it was just classic Thiessen. I know I've said it before. I'm going to go write some other songs. I'm going to write a song to honor Fiber and Frenzy. And at the time, he was just like, hey, I got 2 versions. I don't know which one we should put on. I was like, let's just put both. And he didn't have a title for the second one. So I was like, why don't we just call it Wannabe Ska Version? And so we went with that. And then, we had We're Nothing Without You as well. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun, and you're right. The way they honored the band, Five Iron Frenzy, was really cool. Not a lot of others do that. That summer they played the song live. And it was just great, man. I don't know. There's a lot of fond memories of those days with those guys and a lot of stuff that we worked on together. And it was just all around just having fun and putting out as much music as possible and growing a fan base and having fun with it, So, yeah.
Yeah. So to go back to the way in which you founded Mono versus Stereo, because I recently finally figured out the timeline. I heard this other podcast that you were interviewed on back in 2013, and I finally got the story, but I was always a little confused on the timeline because like the most you see about news and articles of the existence of Mono versus Stereo online, they all talk about when when Relient K took the label over at the end of their Capitol time, like when they were done with that, they took over Mono versus Stereo. So I was always a little confused because some of the online zeitgeist makes it sound like Mono versus Stereo really got going when Relient K then had it, but there's this time where maybe like people writing, people recording the history or whatever in whatever ways kind of miss that it says right on the Wikipedia page, you founded it and it started in 2003. So what was the trajectory of where you started Mono versus Stereo, and then it eventually gets into the hands specifically of was it Thiessen and Hoops who specifically ran it, or was it the whole band?
So the way that went down, so I've been at Gotee I started in 2000, summer of 2002. I've been there 2 years, and I think I mentioned earlier I loved all the artists I was working with at Gotee, but I really loved Relient K, John Rubin, Grits, and at the time Relient K was the only rock band on the label, and we actually come across at Gotee like 3 other bands. A band called Bleach, a band called Spoken, a band called Holland.
Wow.
And we, all ended up being on Tooth and Nail. And me and another guy at Gotee really wanted to sign them. And Gotee was just like, we just don't feel like it's time. And so I felt like we kept missing on some rock bands that we could put out on tour with Relient K as they were, succeeding. And so I came up with this idea for Mono versus Stereo and pitched it to the Gotee owners, Toby and Joey. And I had to pitch budgets and all that kind of stuff, how it would be different than Gotee. And so the initial pitch was, look, we're going to make records cheaper than Gotee. We're going to sign rock bands of all different styles and have them all tour together, just a lot like Tooth and Nail does. Relient K was going to help out by taking some of those bands on tour. And that was really the start of Mono versus Stereo. And the first release was going to be a compilation of some bands on the label, plus other bands in the scene at the time. Again, Matt Thiessen wanted to contribute a song to it, which is great. The first band on the label, the Evan Anthem, was on there, which at that time, Mark Townsend only produced Relient K records. He produced that first record from the Evan Anthem. And then the band committed to taking the Evan Anthem out on their fall tour in the fall of 2003. Everybody Wants to Rule the World tour with Amber Lynn and Don't Look Down. And so there was just a lot of camaraderie going along in the scene. And then especially with me and Relient K and the Mono versus Stereo band. And so the next artist we signed was a guy named Andy Ziff. Then I signed a band called Chasing Victory. I signed a band called The Showdown, a punk band called Last Tuesday, which Matt Thiessen co-produced their first record with a buddy of ours named Joe Marlette, who had done like Denver Harbor and Phoenix TX records. And so, for about 7 years, I was running Mono versus Stereo. I mean, Maylene and the Sons of Disaster was a band, House of Heroes. The Showdown were out on Ozfest in 2007, opened up for Lamb of God and Ozzy Osbourne. Maylene and the Sons of Disaster went from opening up for POD and then being on Warped Tour, And so, but I was going through some personal stuff at the end of 2007. And so I left Mono versus Stereo and left Gotee, took about a year off. At that time, Relient K had just put out the 5 Score record on Capitol, and Capitol was done with the band. And so the band's contract reverted back to Gotee. And so Gotee had one more record with the band, and that was it started out to be the Nashville Tennis EP, which is really just a full record. You know what I mean? Like, it to me is still one of the greatest records in Relient K's catalog. Of like, that's not an EP, that's a full length record.
Oh yeah, we talk about that all the time.
Thiessen, again, like we talked about over delivering, just wanted to over deliver and create a whole second side to that record that was all the B sides. And so that was really their last record with Gotee Records. And so Mono versus Stereo Phase 2 was the band re-signing to Gotee Records after they completed their contract with the Bird and the B-side. And in that, they had the ability to put their records then on Mono versus Stereo, and then sign bands to Mono versus Stereo since I had left.
Gotcha.
The funny thing is, I was only gone for a year. I came back and ended up doing marketing for those releases on Mono versus Stereo, the band's albums, Forget Not Slow Down, and Chaos for Karaoke, and Collapsible Lung, and Air for Free, and the Daysville records, and Dennis and Whitmer. All those were records that I was still a part of, just on a different level. So that's kind of the quick story of Mono versus Stereo.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now. Like I said, it seems like it's just not like it's not a history that's just easily found online if you want to learn about the history of Mono versus Stereo. So we got someone's got to update the Wikipedia page a little better.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention the Nashville, Tennessee EP. We honestly hadn't thought about it that much until we started this podcast, but it was really when we like looked at Nashville, Tennessee EP, we're like, wait, this is a full record. It's over half an hour. It's something like 14 songs, but they call it an EP. And then it was like interviewing John Schneck. We kind of figured out that maybe the idea was like they had an album's worth of material, but like now I'm extrapolating from what you're telling me and what John Schneck told us, but it's like, it seems like maybe they just didn't want the Nashville Tennis EP to be considered album number 6, maybe. Like they were really, correct. He was really, So, okay. That kind of confirms that theory I've had forever.
But but a lot of us wish they would have, because it was just such a departure sonically. And there's so many great songs on that record that I feel like are overlooked in the band's catalog.
Yeah.
And
it took me a while to even.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it took me years to really hone in on the fact that the first half of the record is all new. I mean, I think everyone kind of knows that in general, because that's like the press releases said when it came out. But the fact that the cover is just Bird and the B-sides, it kind of like masks something in your brain. It kind of accidentally like gaslights you into thinking like the whole album is B-sides, even if you know the first half is all new, even if you know they mentioned Ethan, who had just joined the band on that first half. Like it still makes it not feel like an album. It makes it feel like a collection, even though half of it is brand new.
That's what made the vinyl release of the Nashville, Tennessee EP just a few years ago so much fun for us, because it was like, okay, we're just honoring that part of the Bird and the B-sides record as just its own thing, right? Like we just were able to release the Nashville, Tennessee EP just as those songs on a piece of vinyl. And it's a lot of fun just to listen to that section of it as just its own release,
Mm-hmm. So I was curious, what is the status of Mono versus Stereo today? Because there's still a website up. It has like the recent Relient K stuff on there, but I noticed like sometimes when you look at like streaming for any of those earlier Mono versus Stereo records, they all just say copyright Gotee Records. I don't know if that's significant at all. Is Mono versus Stereo maybe like more absorbed by Gotee now?
I mean, all the copyright stuff, when you look at Spotify and Apple, it's more just an ownership thing, and
I see.
Gotee always owned Mono versus Stereo. They were the ones that funded the label. But where Mono versus Stereo exists nowadays, it's just whenever Relient K wants to put out a record or a song or an EP, that label exists for that purpose.
Gotcha.
So, it's always there to help them put out whatever it is they want to release, so.
I see. Okay. I also have a off topic to this, although it's still on the topic of vinyl. Can you tell me, nobody, I've been asking people online and no one has given me a definitive answer, but you're closer to the source. So I feel like you must have an answer for me. How do you pronounce SMLXL vinyl?
Just like that.
You say
SMLXL vinyl.
You spell it out. Okay. Cause like from the beginning of our podcast, we were asking like fans and hoping like someone who actually is in the know would answer, but we've like never had an actual definitive answer that you just say the letters. People assume it might be Smixel or something, but now I'm learning that
it's sizes. It's small, medium, large, extra large.
Right. Yeah. I just wasn't sure if it's actually like a fake word, like if it's being put together like a phonetic word, but I'm glad to actually finally get a definitive answer.
Yep. SMLXL. It was actually a label that was started under Gotee in 1998 or 1999, and they started it with an artist named Matt Beckler, and it was supposed to go through a different distribution channel than what Gotee was going through, and only ever had one release. And so when we decided to start the vinyl company a few years ago, we just needed to come up with a different name, and we're like, why don't we just go back to this name? You know, it's vinyl for all sizes. There's different sizes of vinyl. There's 7-inch, there's a 10-inch, there's a 12-inch. It kind of fits, you know. So, yep.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm glad to finally know that. So yeah. So the way we got in touch online is because I guess, what do you do specifically now with Gotee? Because it seems like you run all the social media, right? Like that's where I originally talked to you, was through the DMs of the Gotee Instagram. So do you run the socials?
So because I've been at Gotee for 20 plus years, there's a small staff. There's 5 of us. I A&R half the roster, and another person A&Rs the other half of the roster. And even as an A&R, you're still kind of co-A&R with Toby. So I work with Ryan Stevenson, Cochran and Company, Tarian, a new artist named Richland. But then I also do other things because, again, we're a small company. So I'm in charge of our radio division, and then I'm in charge of our social networks. So
Gotcha.
Jack of all trades, I try to be. But it's all of us at our company. We all do 4 or 5 different things on a daily basis.
That sounds cool. I mean, that it's like, was Gotee always like as sort of small as it is like tight knit? Is it always been like
very much so?
Okay.
Yep, we're a family. We call it the Gotee fam for a reason, and it's because we're tight knit. I mean, Toby and Joey, who started Gotee, are cousins, you know, and so it's been a family business since day one. So,
gotcha. That's great.
I mean, my wife worked at Forefront Records, which is where DC Talk and Toby put out his records and still does.
Right.
She worked at Gotee for a little bit. I mean, there's just so much. There's so many family vibes to what we do at Gotee. You know, we're just we're 5 people in a small house in Franklin, Tennessee, which is just south of Nashville. We're right down the road from Toby's house and Toby's management company. Yeah, man, we're a family company. You know, we're independent. We're not. Nobody owns Gotee Records except Toby and Joey. There's no financial backing coming from anywhere else. No hidden investor in Sweden or no corporate record label in LA or New York. It's just us in this little house thugging it out every day.
That's cool. That's cool to know. Now that I think about it, it comes up all the time looking at Relient K interviews where it comes up the way in which they moved to Capitol was like it was the same contract because Gotee was part of the same parent company, right? I always get the facts wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. But it's like EMI or something like that.
Correct.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
2002 to 2007, Gotee was Capitol Records owned 25% of Gotee, and they were distributing our records at the time. So when the band was making, I mean, all the way up until the record came out in November. Was it November 4th?
Mm-hmm.
November 4th, is that right? I think it was all the way up until October. If you actually look at the first pressings of it's only got the Gotee logo on it. And it wasn't until a couple weeks later that the record had the Capitol logo on it. And that was because Capitol really did not come on board until about like September, October of 2004. And we licensed that record to Capitol. And then they completely owned the 5 Score record. We still had Christian distribution, but Capitol owned the mainstream distribution on that record.
I see.
And then, then their deal was done, and then they came back to Gotee. So.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's, I always hear this just from being specific to Relient K on this podcast. I hear the story often about the way in which they went to and then eventually left Capitol. But it's interesting to also get the side of that from Gotee's perspective of, being part of that company, being 25% owned by them for that time, and then pretty much going independent, separating off the same time Relient K did. That's cool to learn.
And, the same thing sort of happened for Forget Not Slow Down. They had re-signed to Gotee Records. They were putting their records out on Mono versus Stereo. They made that record with us. And then after the record was done, Sony got really interested in the album and wanted to put it out. And so we still maintained Christian distribution and a bunch of other things. And Sony put the record out everywhere else,
Gotcha.
That lasted for just that one record. And then everything else was back with us.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it always says I always notice it says Jive. It's Jive Records on the back.
That's Sony RCA Jive. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Finally, some of these things are coming together. It's only taken a year and a half of us doing this podcast, but like a band like Relient K, like, you know, it's all kind of oral history. Like you got to piece it together through all these different sources and stuff. There's not just like, you know, there's no larger historical works on Relient K or anything. So it's been like this slow climb of trying to track like all this history. And some stories are told more often than like other details. So it's great to finally get some of these answers. And speaking of, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, yeah, it'd be fun to do some type of book or documentary in the band someday. They'll never allow that.
Oh, okay.
Because, you know, they've never, you know, like they don't view themselves as like, you know, some big band. They're just regular guys, you know what I mean? And they've always been so connected to their fan base and just humble and grateful for what has happened in their lives, you know? And they never were rock stars, you know? I mean, they just love playing music and putting it out and playing shows, you know? And so for them to talk about themselves in any kind of sense like that is just weird for them, you know? So, because they never viewed themselves as some big deal or anything, even though I think Thiessen's one of the best songwriters I've ever, like, just incredible songwriter.
Yeah, we just did Be My Escape on the show, and I found this one interview where the interviewer is like saying like, oh, Be My Escape, it's you know, it's a big hit for you guys, and Thiessen like is completely humble about the answer. He's like, oh, you know, some songs are better than the others, but I don't know if this is a hit for us. I don't know. He was like totally playing down the idea that the band had like this big hit relative to their success so far, and he was like reticent to call it an actual like radio hit even while it was happening. And I thought that was like just so Thiessen from what, you know, I understand of him.
It is. That's very much who he is. So,
well, I have one question that was sent in from our Twitter for you, and this is from a John Schneck, and he asks, to ask you who you drove to Memphis with to see Pearl Jam, and if you were mad that you kept falling asleep on the way.
Oh, I love that John and I. That was a great moment because you know Pearl Jam's a top 5 band for me all time, and it's John's number 1 band of all time.
Okay.
And they were like a unicorn for me. Every time I tried to see them live, something got in the way. Finances, just something always happened in life. And when they came to play Memphis in 2014, John never gotten to see them live because of touring and things like that. And so we both drove out together to see them, and it was awesome. He didn't fall asleep on the way out there. He might have fallen asleep on the way back, but it was a great show, and him and I just had a great time together. So he's a good buddy.
That's great. Yeah, he's we had, like I mentioned earlier, but we had him on the show and he was great. And he was like supported us on Twitter and stuff, and listened to some episodes early on. So he's great.
I love all your guys' memes and stuff. I mean, some of the memes you guys post are hilarious.
Yeah.
They're so good.
And then there's so much fun stuff on YouTube. It's also easy to fill out our social media by finding people, fans' works from like 15 years of YouTube of people making fan videos and covers and cutting together anime music videos and stuff. There's so much out there. The band has touched so many people that it's just it. And that's one of the main driving forces of our podcast. The second half of every episode, we just look at what people have done online with every song. So yeah, it's great to just do that kind of stuff online and meet people who like the memes that we're making and enjoy the stuff that we're finding and sharing. And I'm glad, you liked it as well. Yeah.
No, they're hilarious, man. And look, man, it's good. I mean, I love that you're doing this. I love that you're honoring the guys' catalog of songs and Thiessen songwriting. I think it's great. I've got nothing but respect for those guys, and I'm blessed to call them friends. And they were just so instrumental early on for me with the start of Mono versus Stereo. I mean, all kinds of weird stuff, man. I mean, Hoops is the one doing a little bit of a background vocal coder thing on the end of the Evan Anthem record. And then the Evan Anthem backed up Thiessen on a solo song for the second Mono versus Stereo compilation. And he sang background vocals on the Evan Anthem song on that second Mono versus Stereo compilation. And they switched song titles. If you actually read the lyrics to the songs, they're saying the other thing about the other song. There's just all this weird, deep level nerd stuff, but it was because we were all just hanging out and we were friends and all working together, and it was just a lot of fun, man. So
yeah.
And the Relient K guys are just some of the best people, and yeah, man. So good job, keep doing this podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I gotta give Relient K credit as well. Like the fact that them existing, aside from the fact that they like touch so many people and they're so great to the family and community around them. My co-host isn't here today. She's actually not feeling well, so she's laying down. But my wife, who I host the show with, part of the reason we even became friends, one of the first conversations we had was Relient K. So we got married. So part of it, that was like one of the natural reasons why we felt like it made sense for us to do a Relient K podcast together. So it's like a lot of positive good in the world, them just being a band. Yeah. So, yeah.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And what should people do to follow you or check you out? Do you have anything you specifically want to plug?
No, man. I mean, the only thing I would say right now, man, is if you're a fan of a band, go buy some merchandise, go buy a piece of vinyl, go buy something from an artist that you love, because artists need it right now. Touring is not really happening, and artists, your musicians that you love, need your support. So go buy a piece of merchandise, go buy a vinyl, go buy a live stream. My wife and I did the Jimmy Eat World Bleed American and Future live streams, or Clarity. It was Clarity and Futures. Go buy those things, man. Watch them. Support your artists that you love so much and that have impacted your life. So that would be my statement.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks again for your time.
You're welcome, man. Anything for you guys. We appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks.